Hi folks, HR Funk here. Back in front of the camera with my Smith & Wesson M&P 1522 rifle. And if you saw my recent review of this firearm, you know that overall I'm pretty happy with it, but there are a couple of little things that bug me. And one of the things I mentioned during the review is the safety function on this rifle, which I really do not like. It's very stiff, it's very mushy. I don't get a positive click when I go onto safe or fire, and I just don't like it. So I'm going to be replacing the safety with a Rise armament safety, and thanks to my friends at Optic's Planet, I've got an entire AR lower parts kit. Now, a lot of these parts will not fit into the 1522, but I think the safety is going to work just fine. We'll find out during the course of this video. And I thought, as long as I've taken it apart, I'm also going to try out the Rise Armament RA240 trigger. Now this is a 3-pound single stage trigger, and sometimes when you put different triggers into the 1522, it can have an effect on functioning, depending upon the springs that are used in the trigger. So we'll see what happens when we swap this one out, and we are going to head out to the range when I get everything changed over and see how these parts function in the 1522. And all in all, we'll see what we can do to enhance its functioning. So here we go. So as we start into this project, I will tell you that I am not even going to attempt to monetize this video. So this is going to be a freebie, but since I'm going to be showing a modification to this rifle, I know that it would be a worthless effort to try to monetize it. The 1522 does come apart just like a standard AR-15. So first step is to remove the takedown pin. Next step is to remove the pivot pin, both of which are fairly stiff. This is a new rifle still. And that will allow access into the fire control and the safety. Now, one thing about this particular rifle, and I'll show you the function of that safety. You can see it's just, you can't hear it. It is, as I said, stiff and mushy, but that is the reason I'm going to be replacing it. I started to say a moment ago, though, I do wish that the magazine well of this rifle was cut to the same dimensions as a standard AR-15, because it would be very nice to be able to put this down on a vise block and be able to do this modification using that. Since I can't, I'm just going to be trying to hold on to it as I disassemble everything and then put it all back together. Now, Smith & Wesson does use a 3/16 hex nut to attach the pistol grip to this rifle, which is nice. That just works a little bit easier than one of the big screws. And with a little bit of luck, I won't have to take this thing all the way out to be able to remove the safety. We shall see. But I do want to at least loosen it. And as I do this, you can see the spring right there that powers the detent for the safety. And let's see if it'll come out of there now. Yep, it's going to push right out, just like that. The hammer does have to be cocked in order to be able to do this. So there is our plastic safety, and when I'm done with this video, I'm probably going to throw the thing away. Now I'll go ahead and disassemble my fire control, and I will lower the hammer for this. And I have to grab a punch, so hold on just a second here. And having retrieved my punch, the next thing to remove is going to be the hammer. Usually hammer pins push out pretty easily. Sometimes they might require a tap or two. That one's coming with no problem. Obviously hold on to it. Make sure your hammer doesn't come flying out of there. So there is our hammer. Trigger pins are usually even easier. There is the trigger. And the trigger on the 1522 is a standard AR-15 trigger. This is a steel part. The hammer is cast, as you see there, and the factory trigger didn't feel too bad. I think, or at least I hope, the Rise armament is going to feel better, but we'll find out when we get it all put back together. The Rise armament trigger is a cassette style, as you see here, so it is essentially a self-contained unit, which is nice. Now, one thing I don't really care for is it uses proprietary pins rather than just reusing the standard hammer and trigger pins. There are other triggers that I've used that have this same type of system, and I'll end up securing them with these small screws on either side, and you get 2 hex wrenches with this, so as you screw them on opposing sides of the rifle you can tighten everything down. But I think this just complicates things a little bit. Like I said, I would rather just push the factory pins back in and call it good. In any case, I'll drop this back down inside here. At least I think I will. Thought for a second it wasn't going to fit. And now I will install the new pins. Once I get everything lined up. Once I got everything lined up, those pins went in with no problem whatsoever. So now I can start to install these small screws, and what I'm going to do is use the screws to help center the pins in these holes. And you can see this one is a little farther in on this side than the other side. And having the pins exactly centered might not be a major issue, but it's one of those things that will bug me as an armorer. If something is off center to any real degree. So I'm tightening it a little bit more on this side, and based on what I can see underneath the screw on this side, that should be very good right there. Now I'll do the same thing on this one. And this one is a little farther in on this side, so when I put the screw in on the other side, I'll tighten it down first and pull that pin slightly over to this side. And I apologize, I'm sure my hand is in the way, but all I'm doing is turning this screw, so you're not missing out on much. And I might have to loosen this one a little bit to see where that pin is now. And it looks like we are pretty well centered with that one now too. So before I Loctite these screws, I want to get the safety installed and then check the functioning. So I have to remove the safety from its package. And here is that new Rise Armament safety. Looks like it's a little out of focus. See if I can focus that for all of you to be able to see. And when I compare it to the plastic factory safety, all the dimensions appear to be the same, so hopefully the functioning will be the same. Actually, no. Hopefully the functioning will be a lot better with the metal safety, and I'll change the focus again now. And I'm getting a little bit of interference from the trigger. So what I had to do to get the safety started was hold down on the hammer just like that. That allowed me to get it started into place. Now I've got to depress the detent on this side. And that allowed it to move the rest of the way into place. And I can tighten down the pistol grip now. And let's check the functioning. Make this a little larger. So with the safety on, the hammer does not fall. With the safety off, the hammer falls and it resets. And the feel of this safety is better. It's still not giving me an audible cue that it's in safe and fire, but it's moving much more smoothly. Let me try tightening this down just a little bit more. And no, well, at least it feels better than it did with the plastic safety. What I've done at this point is reassemble the rifle, and I've decided I'm not going to Loctite these screws until I have a chance to test fire the rifle. That way if there's any problem and I decide to take it apart and put the original trigger back in, then at least I haven't Loctited the screws in place. So I will do a final function test, and with the safety on, the hammer doesn't fall. With the safety off, the hammer falls, and holding the trigger to the rear while cycling the action, and the trigger resets. So everything appears to be functioning right. Now let's head off to the range and see how the 1522 is going to perform with these new parts installed. Before I head out to the range, I want to try a quick test on this Rise Armament trigger with my Lyman trigger pull gauge. I believe it's supposed to break around 3.5 pounds. Let's see if we can find out where it actually does break. A little heavier than that on the first pull, 3 pounds, 15.3 ounces. Let's try pull number 2. Three pounds, 13.2 ounces. And 3 pounds, 13.8 ounces for a 3-pull average of 3 pounds, 14.1 ounces. So it's breaking just shy of 4 pounds, not quite 3.5. Overall, the break is pretty nice. It is a single stage trigger, so there's no take up. And not bad. Not a bad upgrade over the factory trigger. Folks, the portion of this video you've seen up to this point was recorded about a week ago. And as I'm recording this portion, it is June 6th of 2024, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And I want to take one moment to say a special thank you to the greatest generation for saving the world. And I mean that, by the way, I'm not being flippant, because they really did nothing less than save the world. So thanks to each and every one of you who's still out there watching, and if you are watching this, this video is dedicated to all of you. In any case, back to the 1522. Since I recorded the earlier portion of this video last week, I took the opportunity while I was waiting for some time to get out to the range to look around and see if I could find one of the 10-round magazines that would make shooting from the bench easier. And as it turned out, the Mag Shack got some of these 10-round magazines in stock. And in fact, they were very reasonably priced. This was $22 as I recall. And I had seen these on some websites for at least twice that much and maybe even a little bit more. So if you're looking for one of these, check out the Mag Shack quick because they're probably not going to last long, especially at that price. In any case, since I had the 10-round magazine, and since I really didn't feel comfortable with the accuracy test that I had done the last time around with the 1522, I decided to reinstall the Hilux 1-to-8 power scope, and I'm going to show you something about this that made that extremely easy. It is this UTG quick release mount. I'll give you a close-up look at this thing and show you how it works because it is fantastic. It really just takes a few seconds to remove the optic that's on the rifle and install the scope, and then all I have to do is a quick zero. And when I tested the zero back out at the range, I had not touched the windage or elevation adjustments since I fired the original accuracy test, which was now 2 or 3 weeks ago. And when I fired it, it didn't perfectly maintain zero. I was about 1.25 inches low and 1.25 inches left, but it took just a little bit of adjustment from that distance of 50 yards to bring me back point of aim, point of impact. And let me give you a close-up look at this quick release UTG mount. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use a section of AR-15 quad rail that I had laying around here. I don't want to reinstall this on the 1522 itself because I've already reinstalled the red dot optic and re-zeroed it, so I don't want to go through that exercise again. But this should be perfectly fine to show you how this works. Now again, this is the UTG. Specifically, it is the UTG AccuSync quick release cantilever mount. And UTG, for anyone who doesn't know, is part of Leapers, and Leapers had a pretty impressive display at the recent NRA annual meeting, and they are headquartered in Michigan, and some of their parts, the UTG Pro parts, now this does not say UTG Pro, it just says UTG, but the UTG Pro parts are actually manufactured in Michigan, and they're moving more and more of their manufacturing to the US, to Michigan, so that's cool. In any case, back to the quick release mount itself. This is the 30mm mount, and this is the high version. And you can see that it mounts forward of the actual top of the upper receiver if this were an upper receiver on an AR rather than a section of quad rail. The quick release is very easy. There are these little latches, and when I push them out of the way, I can open the latch and just rotate the scope off that quickly. And when I put it back on, all I need to do is make sure that I get it back in the same 1913 rail slots, and it locks down just that fast. And as I said, there was a little bit of loss of zero, but not much. I changed my camera angle and the direction of my light because I wanted to make sure that you could see that the latches have small locks that keep them from opening under recoil or any other time you don't want them to open up. I'm not sure if you could see those before. I might have had my fingers in the way, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew that there is a mechanical positive lock to keep these latches closed. It's not just a friction hold. This is the second one of these mounts that I have obtained, and I'm probably going to be getting more of these things because they make it extremely easy if you have an optic that you're moving from firearm to firearm. And I'm actually testing this Hilux 1-to-8 CMR at the moment, so I am moving it from firearm to firearm, and this mount makes it extremely easy to do so. So if you have a situation where you've got an optic, a scope specifically, that you move a lot or you're expecting to move from one firearm to another, you might want to take a look at these. They're not tremendously expensive and they are extremely handy. So as I said before, I was combining my function test of this rifle with the new safety and the new trigger, along with an updated accuracy test. So after reattaching the Hilux 1-to-8 CMR scope, I headed off to the range. I set up at a distance of 50 yards. I was shooting off of bags from the bench. And I decided to shoot 3-shot groups just because that's what I decided to shoot. And some people get upset, they want 5-shot groups or 10-shot groups or whatever. But I was shooting multiple 3-shot groups. In fact, I think altogether I shot 9 3-shot groups. And I'll show you some footage of how that went right now. Okay, two reasons you didn't see all 9 3-shot groups that I fired from 50 yards. First off, inexplicably, my target camera died. I don't know what happened to it. It just, partway through one of the strings of fire, it just stopped recording. I also didn't want the video to get very long and you watching me shoot group after group after group because that's boring. So I just showed you a few of the highlight groups. When I got all done, I measured all 9 3-shot groups and the average was under 1 inch from 50 yards. In fact, it came out to 1.8 minutes of angle, so just a little beneath 1 inch or just a little below 2 minutes of angle from that distance of 50 yards, which I think for a firearm like this is pretty darn good. The best groups were running right at 1 MOA. I had 1 or 2 that were 3/8 of an inch, so below 1 minute of angle. In fact, it was good enough that I decided to try a few shots from 100 yards. And with that Hilux 1-to-8 power CMR, it has a bullet drop compensating reticle, and I'll flash that up on the screen so you can see what it looks like. The reticle has aiming points on the vertical stadia line that are calibrated for a 556 millimeter NATO cartridge, and if that cartridge, or the rifle rather, is zeroed at 200 yards, then the first stadia line aiming point is for 300 yards, the next one is for 400 yards, the next one is for 500 yards, and the last one is for 600 yards. Well, the second one, the one that on a 556 NATO would be calibrated to point of impact at 400 yards, is also subtending 5.6 minutes of angle, which I noticed when I looked at the diagram for that reticle. And I already know from my previous shooting with this rifle that the drop with my 22 rimfire ammunition, the CCI AR Tactical 40 grain load, is 5 inches at 100 yards. So almost exactly the same as that second aiming point on the vertical stadia. So what I did was hold that aiming point just below the bullseye. Again, I'll give you, this is a through the scope view. I tried to get the best one I could. I still haven't come up with a really good way to get this, but just to give you an idea of what my hold was when I fired this group, and then I fired a 5-shot group from that distance of 100 yards using that hold. And here's how that went. Here is that 100-yard target, and the overall group size is 3.75 inches, but there's a problem here, and the problem is this very first round. And some of you are probably saying, well, yeah, and that problem is yours because you blew the shot. Actually, I don't think so. And I can't prove this categorically, but there was something odd with this first shot that I fired. And when I went back and looked at the video, I noticed that there was a difference in the ejection of this very first cartridge case as opposed to all the other cartridge cases. This very first one went down as it was ejected from the ejection port of the rifle and struck the bench to my right. All 4 of the others went up in an arc to my right. They did not go down, which suggests to me there was a difference in the way this first cartridge case interacted with the ejector. And that might have been due to a different bolt velocity as the bolt was cycling and extracting and that cartridge was being ejected. I don't know. Like I said, I can't prove it, but with the consistency of the drop of all 4 of these other shots, and the windage on this is perfect. It would be right in with this group if it was down here. I think there was something off with that first cartridge that caused it to strike so much higher than the rest of the group. Again, this was all the exact same hold with each one of those shots. And that vertical aiming point that I was talking about was right here, right at the bottom of the white circle. the horizontal stadia line. The vertical stadia line was going right up through the center of the target as I was squeezing off those shots. So if we discount shot number 1, these 4 are in a group that measures 1.875 inches. So exactly the average of those 3-shot groups that I was firing at 50 yards, at least in terms of the size and minutes of angle. The best 3 are actually in, I think 1.5, yes, 1.5 inches. So you can make of this what you want to. You can blame me, that's okay. You can choose to include this in the accuracy of the rifle, or you can choose to discount it and look at these 4 shots down here. For myself, I am comfortable discounting this first shot and looking at these as an actual representation of the accuracy of the rifle, especially since it's consistent with the groups that I was firing at 50 yards. Switching gears to the function test with the new parts that were installed in this rifle, it functioned 100% with each and every one of those rounds of the CCI AR tactical ammunition. I'm not sure how many I fired altogether out there, probably 100. And at this juncture, I've probably got 400 rounds through this rifle or something close to that. It's easy to run through a lot of 22 ammunition with a semi-auto rifle. And I still haven't cleaned the thing. I need to get around to doing that one of these days. But functioning was perfect. When I got done with the accuracy testing and the original or initial function test, I also loaded up 2 25-round magazines with some bulk pack Federal ammunition, and I fired that all out. I had 1 failure with the bulk pack Federal, and that was a cartridge that fired and the bolt cycled, and it actually fed and chambered a new round into the chamber, but it didn't reset the hammer. So when I tried to squeeze the trigger, it wouldn't squeeze because the hammer was already down. And I'm blaming that on the ammunition because I think that's one where with bulk pack ammunition there was just 1 cartridge that didn't have quite enough oomph, had a little less powder or what have you, and it didn't fully cycle the bolt to reset the hammer. Other than that 1 bobble, functioning with the M&P 1522 was 100% with both the AR tactical ammunition and that Federal bulk pack. The safety function, as I mentioned before, is still not quite as positive as I would like it to be, but at least it's moving more freely, and I think the lack of that positive lock to the engaged and disengaged position is just the nature of the beast of this polymer lower of the 1522. The Rise Armament trigger is a definite upgrade over and above the factory trigger. And this is light enough that it's good for target work. It would be good for small game hunting or something like I would probably use it for, which would be groundhog hunting. I don't know if I would put this trigger in a defensive rifle. It is light enough that in a high stress situation, I don't know. I would be a little bit worried about that. But for match use or hunting or just a range rifle, I think it's perfectly fine. And as I said, it's a definite upgrade over and above the factory option. In any case, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. And don't forget House of Pain. You can go to House of Pain Armament or House of Pain Munitions, and with either one, you can use my discount code, which is HRFUNK, and that'll save you some money off your purchase from House of Pain. And lastly, don't forget the Target sponsor. Go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.